does that sometimes. It just tells me stuff that are not
No problem. It's
actually
no
on.
problem. I
Yeah.
just want to let you know that I am recording the meeting for the podcast.
Okay. Pleasure. I don't do. It's my first time doing stuff like this.
Welcome to Community Catalyst. This podcast explores the role of informal trade, the role of traditional leaders on informal trade and land access. I'm your host, uThubelihle Mlambo, and in today's episode, we have a guest who will help us better understand the relationship between informal trading and traditional leadership. Our guest, Mr. Ndumiso, is a professional town and regional planner registered with SACPLAN. He is a manager of town planning and building control at Dr. Beyers Naude local municipality. He obtained his National Diploma in Town and Regional Planning from Cape Peninsula University of Technology and further pursued his studies, graduating with a Bachelor of Technology in Town and Regional Planning from the University of Johannesburg. With a diverse background in planning, including his previous role as a candidate town and regional planner at DLGTA in the Eastern Cape, Ndumiso has a comprehensive understanding of the challenges and opportunities in urban development. And in his current role, Ndumiso plays an important role in shaping the town planning and building control strategies. His practical experience and academic background make him a valuable resource for our discussion today. Thank you again for joining me, Mr. Ndumiso.
Thanks to Uthubelihle. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Before we start, I'd like to share my background and personal interest to the topic. So I'm from a rural town called Mbazwana, which is under KwaMhlabialingana municipality in the north of KwaZulu-Natal. I'm not sure if you've heard of that place.
I've heard of the place, but in a different context.
We're not going to discuss that context today. But I know what you're talking about already.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where I'm from, and the town is under Ubkosi Bagwazikali, the traditional leaders of Mbela, and this is where the interest sort of came from. Me analyzing how they distribute land, as they are the ones who are responsible for land distribution, and how that has shaped spaces for informal traders and how it also limits the spaces in which they can occupy. So that's where the interest of this research came about.
Awesome. Sounds interesting. Yeah.
I'm glad you find it interesting. So I just would like to know, can you share your insights on the role of town planning in supporting and regulating informal trade within the community?
Okay, so when you talk about informal trading and town planning, or
Yes.
maybe urban and regional planning, you are sort of operating within the realm of land use management or land use control. So in planning, you find about let me say three categories of planning. So you get your spatial planning, which is your high level planning. And so spatial planning will consider everything, land use management, land use control, environmental management, etc., forward planning.
Yes.
And then you also get development planning. So development planning also considers a variety of things. That will also include socio-spatial or socio-economic elements, that include criminal elements, that just the socials of how we live and interact as human beings in spaces such as, settlements, townships, and urban spaces. But the more tedious kind of planning that you get is when you deal with land use management and land use control.
Okay.
So land use management is governed by your land use schemes, right?
Okay.
it will tell you this is appropriate here, that's appropriate there, etc. And this is where you make a link between the what you call this informal trade and space. Do you get what I mean? So
yes.
that's where then it comes in into play. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. I'm also trying not to talk too much so that I don't forget your question as well. No, but I think that's where it's mostly located within land use control.
Okay, yes. I feel like you've answered the question in terms of what the role of town planning is in regulating informal trade. You're saying it's under the land use.
Land use management, land use control.
Yes, land use management, land use control. So how does the municipality's town planning strategies take into consideration the needs and challenges that are faced by informal traders?
Yeah, so municipalities or local authorities are your third sphere of government, which is also autonomous in some way.
Yes.
Autonomous in the sense that they develop their own policies, they develop their own bylaws.
Yes.
And they collect their own revenue. They will get so in terms of the constitution, the legislation, the MSA, it's an autonomous government. So it will have its policies that govern how we should deal with informal trade. Bylaws that try to coordinate the use of space in as far as informal trade. Yes. But then when you say informal trade, that's a very broad term. It can be understood in various ways. Because informal trade can be seen as vending, but it can also be seen as your let me make an example. You go into any township, you see a spaza shop, right? Because this land traditionally known as land governed by traditional leadership.
Yes.
Most of the time that land is not surveyed, and it's seen as informal in its nature.
Yes.
And so in that context, a spaza shop can also be in the category of informal trade.
Yes.
Right? For as long as it is located in an informal or unsurveyed, or let's say commonage, space. So municipalities will have then policies like your schemes, your land use schemes, spatial policies, local or neighborhood based land use management schemes, etc. And that's how they regulate that space.
I was actually moving towards that understanding, what the role of municipality is when the land is under traditional authority. What is the role of the municipality in that sense on a space where it's under traditional authority?
Well, South Africa is how do I put it? Is structured in a sense that the traditional authority has got a responsibility in terms of managing land that is allocated to traditional leadership, right? However, when it comes to issues of governance,
yes,
the traditional authority still must or is allocated under the local authority. So when we were implementing SACPLAN, the time we were trying to educate the public about this legislation that was coming. We had to then meet with traditional authorities and all forms of members of the public,
yes,
business chambers and all of that. It was interesting to note that when it comes to the formation of local councils,
yes,
you've got to have a councillor that will be responsible of areas that fall under traditional authority. So traditional authority may be viewed as custodians of that particular land, but when it comes to administering the affairs of that particular space,
yes,
that then falls in the hands of a councillor, which is elected by the public. You know how it works.
oh
in this land.
yes,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
So in this sense, traditional authorities may allocate space for you to use, but are limited in terms of how they service that particular
Yes.
space. That responsibility or role still falls within the municipality, you know.
Okay.
So their role, in essence, as it is in the, there is an act, it just escapes me now. There's an act that governs traditional leadership, and that gives them a specific role in terms of governance. This is now governance at a local level, at a provincial and a national level. So it seems to me, from where I'm standing, their role is more on issues of culture, issues of, you know, the preserving of culture, you know, and that's in those kind of, you know, the formations of these organizations that that link with the national government in terms of, but in issues of administering, you know, infrastructure, that doesn't, they don't have a part in any of that, unless it will be a case similar to an Ingonyama trust, you know. So it's a trust. It's a trust that's formed. That is a legal person, and you know, a legal person has specific responsibilities in this sense, irresponsible for the servicing and all of that. So, but in any other case where there isn't any of this legal, you know, person formed in terms of a trust, that role still resides within the space of the local authority and not in the space of a traditional leadership.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for that. That is really that was really informative, and it also helps me in terms of my research. I wasn't aware that traditional authorities are recognized as the custodians of the land, but then there's certain situations where there's the councillor who's then responsible for things like the servicing of infrastructure and allocation of land. I didn't know that that was the case.
Yeah, definitely. So in this other case, we were in a meeting. We attended a meeting to come and address this Pluma thing, and where a traditional chief was in attendance.
Yes.
And we were chased from that meeting, by the way. This happened somewhere in the Eastern Cape.
Okay. Why?
Yeah. So, you know, people didn't understand why, you know, the reasons we were there, and what on earth are we talking about when we're talking about Spluma and so forth and so on. And
yes,
so the meeting was convened by a councillor, but the traditional chief was in attendance, right, to listen to what the councillor had to say about the issues they have, you know, in their spaces. So this is the reason why I'm saying traditional leadership is limited in as far as servicing your space. We've got a challenge happening in a certain part of the Eastern Cape currently, where traditional leaders are allocating land to, you know, guys like myself, yourself. If you are working somewhere in a municipality, you want to build a house, but you want to build a house like in your normal urban space, right? Okay. You build a double-story house. This double-story house must have flashing toilets, must have all the works, you know.
Yes.
But the water provided by a district municipality is calculated in a sense that they know a specific number of people living in that region. And this specific number informs the liters they will dispense, you know, for water and bulk services and all of that. So now what's happening is that people are given land by traditional leadership. They will tell them, okay, no, you can build there, you can build there, and people are building big houses.
Yes.
The challenge now is they run out of water.
Yeah, because it's not within the...
Exactly. There's no plan for that. There's no layout for that. And when there is no layout for that, there is no ERF numbers allocated. And if there's no ERF numbers allocated, it's tough for you to determine for how many people are you now providing this bulk services. Sometimes traditional leadership do this allocation of land in ignorance because they don't know what it entails, and they don't know the implication of it.
Yes.
Should that land be, should the densities go high? Because essentially those places are low densities, homestead.
Yes.
With
single
sheep,
dwellings,
single dwellings, and now all of a sudden you're getting people building double-story houses, and it becomes very fast, densified, and then you get problems like your services, run out of water, and and those type of things.
In terms of my research as well, the case study that I'm looking at is in Bazwane, where I'm from. And that's why I even said I didn't know that sometimes a councillor is responsible, because in my case, traditional authorities are the ones who distribute land. And like you said, they are not well informed in terms of spatial planning and land use management. So the way in which they distribute land doesn't really affect them. They focus on the revenue that they get from distributing land. So then that causes issues for the municipality or planners in that area. So I just want to know, how then does the municipality collaborate with traditional leaders to address land access issues, especially for informal traders?
Yeah, so you see the idea of wall-to-wall schemes. Let's start that conversation there.
Okay.
Because SPLUMA has come to say all municipalities must develop wall-to-wall schemes, right? Okay. What that means is the regulation of land. We must be able as a municipality to regulate all spaces within our jurisdiction as a municipality.
Okay.
So if we don't have a scheme that regulates how the Mbazwana area uses the land, then SPLUMA is saying all municipalities must have a wall-to-wall scheme. Okay. So first, it begins there. Now, how do you develop this wall-to-wall scheme? Zoning map, your zoning register, and your zoning regulations. Now, when you're doing your zoning maps, you've got to essentially say this area is categorized as a residential area. For you to do that, you've got to then map out the area and pick up how many households are in this particular. So it starts from there in collaboration between this traditional element and your local authority. They must develop a wall-to-wall scheme, even for those areas that are seen to belong to traditional authorities. And it's a touchy issue. It's a very sensitive issue. The moment you talk about regulating land under traditional authority, you're starting trouble for yourself. Right?
Yes.
So let's make an example of a rural area. Yes. This rural area here has got X amount of households. And how do you know that? Because you've got to map the whole thing, and you've got to allocate numbers for the whole thing. And those numbers are numbers or could be plot numbers or earth numbers that must be recognized by a local authority in terms of ownership, in terms of who stays there, what's the use, and all of that stuff. So that's where it begins. So without a land use scheme, I don't see it. I don't see the whole relationship, being a healthy relationship.
Okay.
It's put us where we are today. With you look at all the district municipalities that have traditional authorities within them, and if you start having those conversations around how do those areas get serviced and the frequency of the services in those areas, you will discover a whole lot of challenges. Because and the challenge you're going to have is for most municipalities don't see planning as a resource. They think it's a nice to have. It's a planner. Okay, we've got to hire a planner and all of that. in most municipalities, this is not a valued, skill.
Yes.
Some municipalities, you'll find that they can do for years without planning, without planners, right? And so this is why they run into challenges of service provision, because you've got to develop all of these maps that inform how you then service your areas. You've got to develop your spatial development framework in terms of where do you see this area in 20 years, So the relationship starts there. It's tough to see how the relation is going to be if you don't have a land use scheme, you don't have a spatial development framework, those sorts of policies,
No, I understand what she's saying. But it's very, for the lack of a better word, very depressing to hear that. There are just a lot of challenges that planners face. And I'm just trying to understand how you then work around them to make sure that you're able to do your work at the end of the day. I feel like it's just challenges after challenges. And you're making me think of the situation that's also happening in Botswana. There was plans that were created for future developments on a certain piece of land. Like I said, it's a rural area, so there's literally little to zero development occurring in the space. The future development was bringing a mall to the town for people, because that is very much needed. People travel long hours to get the things that they need. So, but then because the people who are responsible for the allocation of land are traditional leaders, the land was given to a random person in the community, who then built a surgery, but he doesn't even use it. He left the area even. And now we're stuck with this problem that we could have built something for the community and people would have used that space. Now we have this
benefits everybody.
Yes. Can you at least share some examples of successful initiatives maybe that municipality have in place to promote the growth of informal trade while maintaining the integrity of urban planning as well?
Sure. Look, as I said, traditional leadership is limited, but it doesn't mean there aren't any, positives. To take an example of a rural area.
Yes.
That is, I don't know if you've heard of, I'm sure you're honors or master.
Honors.
Are you on honors? Yeah.
Yes.
Now you will have heard about an urban edge, right?
Yes.
When you're doing your land use, your spatial development framework, you will have an urban edge. Now I've seen in other areas, policies that they've adopted that talk to settlement edge, settlement edge. So these areas will be remote from towns, like your Durban. I don't know what's the closest town to Botswana, but
Richards Bay.
Yeah, so the closest Richards, but you will find if you look at your spatial development framework, it's outside of Richards Bay's urban edge.
Yes.
So it means that there's limitations to that. But I've seen in other areas they would come up with settlement edges. So when you do a settlement edge, you do it the same as an urban edge. Yes. But you are trying to define the settlement. So by defining the settlement, you are trying to control everything within that settlement edge. And in addition to that, you can come up with means and ways to supply specific services. Say, for an example, when you've determined how big the settlement is, you are able to then say, determine where are the business or trading areas within that settlement. Then you map those out in a spatial plan. This is where we see business. This is where we see recreational areas. This is where we see settlement, in the industries and all of that. And out of those plans, you are able to then quantify the necessary, water provision for those areas, through a borehole, through whatever.
Yes.
And if your traditional leader who's responsible for that particular area can register a trust and all of that and build that infrastructure to supply, or not even the traditional leader, let's say a district municipality, you know, establishes this form or this you know, this mechanism to supply services and so forth. Then your business elements or your industries, can start having or benefiting from that sort of planning.
Like you said, you share a lot of information all at once as well. So as we talk, I'm trying to process as well what you were saying. But I just want to mention something to the people who are listening as well. You mentioned the urban edge, and some of the audience might not know what an urban edge is. And in terms of urban planning, it's a boundary that separates urban areas from rural or undeveloped areas. And the concept of an urban edge, especially in urban planning, is to help define the spatial extent of urban areas and guides or decisions that are related to land use or infrastructure. From your perspective, what can you share as a potential solution or maybe like recommendations to maybe enhance the collaboration between traditional leaders and the municipality?
Okay, so if we take the lessons from the current setup, so how the whole thing is set up now is you've got COGTA, you've got district municipalities, you've got your local authority. So COGTA, the cooperative governance and traditional affairs, will be responsible for that relationship at the moment as it is legislated, right? So there's a huge gap. I don't know how it is in KZN, but I know in the Eastern Cape it's huge. There's a huge gap that COGTA can sort of fill to make the linkages between the three spheres, local authorities, district authorities, and traditional authorities. But in an event that a municipality is struggling with this link, the role of politicians can assist also in this manner to set up a municipality in such a manner that it collaborates, with a traditional, So you've got portfolios that are, that are flexible. Your local economic development officers. So there you've got an opportunity to link a local authority and a traditional area in order to benefit the traditional or rural area.
Thank you so much, Ndumiso. Today I learned a lot. Just understanding what the role of traditional leaders is, especially in different areas as well. And then the limitations and challenges that poses for municipalities and planners in terms of providing for the community and ensuring that their needs are being met, and also understanding like possible initiatives or approaches that we can use to mitigate like the relationship and ensuring that there's a collaboration between the parties and making sure that we are then able to provide for informal traders. Like you said, the LED office.
I'm glad uThubelihle is hopefully I didn't do too bad.
No, you did. Why don't you think you did? But you didn't do bad at all. It was very informative. I literally gonna have to sit through and rewatch this for my research as well. Just to the audience, thank you so much for joining us today. This is Community Catalyst, and I'm your host, uThubelihle Mlambo, and I am signing out.